Hello and welcome to In the Skies of Love, a podcast dedicated to the classic anime series Legend of the Galactic Heroes. My name is Kamel, and I invite you to accompany me as I make my way through the classic space opera for the first time. Joining us on our voyage are our guides Tom and Joel, two diehard fans. Together we'll be reviewing and analysing each episode of Legends of the Galactic Heroes, exploring its complex characters, intricate political machinations, and breathtaking space battles. We'll delve into the themes, symbols, and historical references that make this series a timeless classic, sharing our thoughts and insights with you as we journey through the skies of love and war in Legend of the Galactic Heroes. So sit back, relax, and join us on this epic adventure.
Well, that was beautiful.
Yeah, I did that well, right?
That was good,
That
yeah.
was very clean.
I don't know if I call myself a diehard fan. I mean, I
Yeah,
like
made
Bruce
this comment
Willis,
last time.
but you know,
Okay, cutting that joke out.
Yeah.
I'm going to come up with a new one every time.
So this week we're going to be covering episodes 3, 4, and 5. That's Birth of the 13th Fleet. You wrote feet in the Google Doc, Joel. Episode 4, Empire's Afterglow, and Episode 5, the Kastrop Rebellion.
Yeah, so I guess we can go through kind of each of the episodes one by one, and then maybe we can talk at the end about this sort of thematic arc, or whether this even is a thematic arc, because I think we picked them because it's kind of 3 in-between episodes, between 2 arcs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
thought
how
we
it
should
felt.
watch more than one episode, and when I looked up the episode list, we have one set in Three Planets Alliance, one set in the Empire, and then it kind of felt like the next one was connected to the previous one too
Yeah.
much to not do the back-to-back. So
Yeah.
it's sort of an arc, but or 2 small arcs.
Yeah, so maybe we can just start with what did you think of these the first episode, Birth of the 13th Fleet, Kamal?
Yeah, how did you find the opening where you're immediately introduced to a new character in Yang Wenli's house?
Maybe we should read the plot summary out for the third one.
Oh yeah,
first.
okay. Yeah.
Yang Wenli returns to the Free Planets Alliance capital on the planet Heinessen. Is that how you pronounce it?
Heinessen, yeah.
Yeah, like the beer.
Secretary of Defense Job
Job.
Trunicht holds a memorial for the soldiers who fell at the Battle of Astarte. During his speech, Jessica Edwards confronts Trunicht, criticizing the government for praising the war dead while refusing to fight themselves. She is forcibly removed from the auditorium and is pursued by the patriotic Knights Corps, who intend to kill her. She is, however, rescued by Yang Wenli and Dusty Attenborough. Wow. Yang then succeeds in protecting Jessica long enough to convince Trunicht to call off the PKC. The following day, Yang Wenli is promoted to the rank of Rear Admiral and given command of the newly formed 13th Fleet, and is ordered to capture the Empire's Iserlohn fortress, which had thus far managed to completely repel every Alliance attempt to capture it. Okay, I remember this episode now. I actually didn't until I read that.
Well, yeah, that's yeah.
Because I watched 5 and 4 more recently, and I watched 3 a little while ago.
Okay.
Okay, I'm actually gonna start with the intro because I have some more thoughts about the intro. The opening notes of the song sound very 1966 Star Trek to me. Like,
that's true.
Yeah, they do.
it feels
Yeah.
deliberate to me in how close it is in a way.
Yeah. I hear it.
You guys also mentioned that the singer has like a shaky note where she doesn't quite hit it, and I heard it this time, which I feel bad saying.
Yeah,
I really do think that's the engineer's fault. They should really have caught that and fixed it.
I wonder
I agree,
how many takes did they do? My favorite thing about this, and I don't want to spoil too much, is that you get to look forward to this every season. Every season they put in a note that she's just struggles with.
That's the thing, is like you say it should have been the engineers, but it's every single intro song. Again, no shade thrown on the artist. I think these songs are actually quite vocally demanding. But yeah, she manages to mess up a note on basically every one of the intro songs. So yeah, you have that to look forward to. to the point where it starts to feel like maybe it's like an artistic choice. You know, is it supposed to represent something? Is it the discord in the galaxy or something? Yeah,
Very
Wow,
poetic.
that is a deep
yeah,
read.
yeah. Also, while we're talking about mistakes, these uh, these plot summaries that I've pulled from the wiki
Mhm.
are full of typos, like absolutely packed full of typos. And I think that the people whatever wonderful people put together the Legend of Galactic Heroes wiki should get a quality assurance manager personally. Yeah. So yes, okay, let's start with the actual. So when we opened the episode, yeah, Tom mentioned we are thrown into Yang Wenli's suburban home, and we're introduced to a brand new character, um, completely cold open onto a brand new character. Um, how did you feel about this?
Is this True Neck you're referring to?
No, no. Um,
Which
there's a
character?
char- the char- there's a character in Yang Wenli's home who's
Oh, yeah,
making
yeah,
him.
yeah. Julian, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
Julian. Yeah, yeah.
I was confused at their relationship. I did not know if it
Mm,
was Julian was like Yang Wenli's little brother
mm,
or his assistant
mm.
or I I I don't know. It's a very strange relationship those two have. I'm not quite a butler. Like I'm not clear on what is going
Yeah,
on there.
I was also extremely confused the first time he
yeah.
appeared because they don't bother really to explain it for a while, or maybe not bother is maybe not the right phrase. Intentionally choose not to explain who he is or why he's there for a while. You're just
It does seem
Yeah.
intentional because the show has a desire to explain a lot by using the narrator to give backstory.
Mhm,
I'm thinking of like episode 5, which we'll get
mm,
to, but that explains quite a lot of background to the central
mhm,
conflict of
mhm.
that episode. Um, but Julian is like, "Hey, you'll get it eventually. Don't worry about it."
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. All the way through episode 3, the first time I watched it, all the way until the end. Like, who is this guy? Like, where did he come from? Was he on the ship in like the first 2 episodes? Was I supposed to remember him? Because obviously there's like a trillion characters in the first 2 episodes. So I did wonder like whether I had just forgotten something. Um,
Is it
but
is it
no, I didn't.
more oversight by the writer, or is it deliberate, like a mystery that you should be thinking about?
It's definitely not a mystery. I don't know whether it's oversight either. What's weird about it is that like I feel like as viewers you're just supposed to understand what their relationship is immediately, um, which yeah did feel surprising the first time I watched the show because until much later on their relationship wasn't really clarified. Um, I guess there are some hints to it in this episode, but yeah, it's definitely not supposed to be a mystery or anything.
Mm.
Can I tell you what it reminds me of?
Mm,
I don't know if you've ever watched the television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Um,
Tom has it. I
I
have not.
have a long time ago.
in season, so Buffy's a single child. What do you call it? A single child?
Oh
a
yeah, okay, I
an
know what
only
you're gonna
Child.
say.
child.
Yeah,
And in
Singles.
season 5, they just out of
Yeah,
nowhere introduced that she has a little sister.
Mm,
yeah,
Um, and like with that explanation, and then that becomes a plot point that she appeared out of nowhere halfway through that season.
I
yeah.
see. I see.
Yeah, I remember being very confused about that and wondering if I'd missed a season or an episode and spent
Yeah,
ages trying to work out which must have been really confusing for the people watching it the very first time round. It eventually makes sense. This is not like that. This is just a guy who lives with Yang Wenli, and at some point you get to hear more about his backstory, and then you're like, oh, okay,
Yeah, I mean, I think the show does throw you for a spin at the beginning. Is this his son or his brother or his, his boyfriend? Like, what is going on here? But yeah, it's no, there's no mystery. The show just throws you into it. Um,
is Julian meant to mirror Siegfried in a way?
hmm. I think, yeah, I mean, the show is full of these like mentor mentee relationships.
Hmm.
Maybe we can, yeah, we'll talk about this, I guess, in the episode 4 when we move on to it as well. But I feel like the Siegfried the Kircheis Lohengrin relationship is much more like equitable, like less like mentor mentee dynamic. Like they kind of bounce off of one another. Obviously, one has like actual established power, but yeah, as individuals, they rely on each other quite heavily.
Yeah, we'll get to that because I don't know that I fully agree. Yang Wenli also at the beginning of this episode, I wrote he reminded me a little bit of L from Death Note.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So maybe this is just a trope in anime or something. The like the casual genius, like so smart that he just doesn't care. Like, what's the big deal? But also, do you get what I'm saying? He's not. He doesn't have the idiosyncrasies of L or those types of characters.
Yeah. Again, so a lot of people have interpreted like Yang Wenli's character as the Taoist fool archetype, like because the writer is so familiar with Chinese history. A lot of the characters are like drawn from those philosophies, like from Spring Autumn period or Warring States period. And I think that most of Yang Wenli's like personality traits like that, where he's sort of clueless and casual and a genius, but also lazy and this kind of stuff. I think most of it's drawn from there. I wouldn't be surprised if his character then affected like tropes in anime later on, because definitely like the show was in the 80s like hugely popular. So, but I'm not sure if it was a trope beforehand. I think it's I don't know enough about anime from before 1980. I have to say for sure. But
what is the name of this trope? The Taoist fool? Did you say?
Taoist fool? Yeah.
Is part of that trope that you sneak alcohol and brandy with your tea in the morning, as he does.
Exactly.
It probably is actually.
It is. There's like a really famous poem by I can't remember which of the masters it is, but who talks about basically being so drunk on his porch in the middle of the day that he can't go back inside to get food. So he's just like wasted on his porch and just watching the world go by, and that's the whole poem.
That sounds like classic Yang Wenli to me.
Yeah. So yeah, it's people have mentioned it. Yeah, especially like a lot of the people I follow on Twitter who are into Legend of the Galactic Heroes make jokes about him being a Taoist archetype quite a lot. So
one of the other things that I guess that made me think that Julian's story was a bit of a mystery was they make a casual reference to I don't know if it's Yang Wenli or if it's Julian, I forget now, but them having a father that had debts as a merchant that maybe led to him joining the military.
Yeah, I think what happens is Julian says that he wants to be a soldier when he grows up, which was useful to know because I wasn't quite sure how old he was supposed to be when he was first introduced. So I guess he's there introduced as not an adult, and he says he wants to be a soldier because his late father was a soldier. So we also know that his father is dead. And then Yang Wenli says, "You don't have to be the same profession as your dad. My dad was a merchant, and now I'm a soldier."
Right.
But yeah, he does mention that his dad like was penniless when he died or something like this, right? Like
maybe I don't remember that.
Yeah, I wrote down that he had debts as a merchant.
Okay.
I think that all of this is kind of earning the fact that Yang Wenli is like a reluctant soldier, right? Like it doesn't really gel with his character to have entered the military willingly, so he kind of has to have a backstory that places him in a situation where he's forced to become a soldier or encouraged to become a soldier.
I think in these early episodes, and in this episode maybe in particular, that he's very reluctant to take on more power. Seems very skeptical and afraid of it. He doesn't really seem like he particularly wants to get promoted to this new role that he gets promoted to, and or any of the fame for the the battle that's just happened. He's you kind of do without it, I guess.
He makes a point about only wanting to read about military history
Yeah,
rather than make it, which I guess
yeah,
is what he's
yeah,
doing right now by being so young
yeah.
and being promoted and whatnot.
Yeah, I think the other thing about Yang Wenli that will become clear is his desire to be a historian, but being forced to do a different job. It's very much like a self-insert by the writer, at least from my perspective. Like my original character, Do Not Steal. He's so cool. He's so smart. He just wants to do history. Which he's a really good character, so you get a pass. But it's yeah.
I had a question, which was: is the military of the FPA only men?
No, but it's definitely mostly men
Okay.
in the show. Yeah, or at least what we see in the show. Yeah,
I think this
just
will be
wondering.
a facet of the show that we'll talk about more at some point, about the huge array of male characters and the very few female characters that are in the show. Maybe when some of those female characters have more of their arcs, will become a lot more noticeable that that is the case.
Yeah, the show is not particularly interested in the stories of women in general. I don't think that's a controversial statement. Most of the women in the show don't get particularly complex arcs, and compared to some of the male characters in the show, they get really underwhelming, extremely underwhelming arcs. Yeah, but we'll go into that later on. I think when that becomes more egregious as the show goes on.
So after this, we go to the is it the president making a speech to like a stadium full of people?
Yeah, it's like defense secretary of defense or something like that, I think.
Yeah.
Pretty
some
high
official
ranking.
post. Yeah.
Oh, this is Tunic, right?
I did.
Yeah,
Trunheit or Trunheit.
Trunheit. Okay.
Trunheit.
I can't remember how they pronounce his name in the show, but I did write the gang pulls a sickie because basically everybody, like the whole. It's so funny. Yang Wenli is like asleep and he's like, "Oh, I don't want to go in. I just want to get drunk at home." And then like Dusty Attenborough calls him and he's like, "Oh yeah, me too."
What an incredible name that they've chosen for that character.
Yeah. How can we communicate that this guy is supposed to be American, like in the shortest, most concise way possible? Dusty Attenborough.
Well, Dusty says that to me, but Attenborough says British.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Where is he giving the speech? It feels like a sports stadium, but the world's largest sports stadium. It's very dark, very creepy. I found the whole thing very like Evil Empire looking.
So I actually wrote about this because I wanted to ask you about it. Like the architecture that they've chosen for the Free Planets Alliance. Like I guess this is like an assembly building, like like the UN or like something like this, because you have loads of citizens like packed into a hall to hear this speech. Like, but like all of the architecture in that scene, to me, made all the characters feel super insignificant. Like there's a bit where Jessica Edwards like steps out into the car park or whatever. I don't know if it's supposed to be the car park, and it's just this like concrete desert, like just this expanse
empty.
of nothing going off into the distance, and it makes her feel like really tiny. And like you say, like the sports hall that they're in is just this like absolutely colossal space that's like dark and frightening and all these sorts of things. I don't know. It to me, all the talk of democracy in that scene seemed very contrasted with the architecture. But maybe I don't know what the real world influences are. Maybe you know.
I'll tell you that I found the architecture, like the architectural design of that scene and the exterior, where she's walking out into the barren landscape, to be kind of incoherent, because the interior of that hall felt less like a UN central, Congress, and more like a sports stadium. The size just felt that big. But then when she's leaving the building, it's a skyscraper made of gold.
Right.
It doesn't feel like those two are the same space, but it's clearly implied to be. I guess it doesn't have to actually architecturally make sense. It's fine. It can be represented. But I guess you could argue that like it's saying on the outside it looks gold and shiny and everyone loves it and it's a beacon to the world. But when you go inside and the core is dark and scary, you know, there's a reason architects always, when they design democratic buildings and stuff, buildings for democracy, they're always like, and there's a lot of transparency and glass in the building to, you know, the democratic process is transparent. It's really
Right.
like,
So yeah.
I don't know, maybe that's surface level thinking, but architects love that stuff. And it also is strange in the way that like, why would you build the center of your democracy out in this barren landscape? You would build it in the middle of the city, like that's where you'd want it to be, where the people are. But no, it's in the middle of nowhere, where rampant gangs of like right wing extremists can kill you right in front of the building. So maybe it is accurate in a way, you know. Maybe that is real. Yeah, I found the Empire's architecture makes more sense to me than the FPA's, at least coherently from the inside.
Yeah, I remember being quite weirded out by the whole, especially the outside where she's walking down the pavement or whatever, and it's so empty. You're like, how could it be so empty? That hall was packed full of people.
But
I guess it's
Animators
just
might just not have wanted to draw 50,000 cars.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think it emphasizes her particular journey in that moment and like how she's feeling, and also it feels like the democratic process, I guess, has already drifted on this planet. It's like it's as you say, it's not in the middle of the city. It's kind of removed, and it's obviously from the speech that he gives, you can tell that it's completely not what it's supposed to be anymore. And the scenery maybe is also kind of
it's the kind of building that would be built by the government in power in a not very democratic state with a lot of money, if you get what I'm saying. And in a space where they have space to do it. I'm not naming any countries, but I think you get the sort of idea that I'm getting at. Which I think is sort of, I don't know, maybe that's a bit ahead of its time, because I feel like that's quite a modern thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, it feels like that section of the story, it feels like a planned community. Like, it feels like the heart of government has been, like, removed and transplanted out into the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like as you say, it should have been in the center of the city and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, you could make the argument that they just didn't want to draw, like, 50,000 cars, or they didn't want to draw, like, a city backdrop. But if you are cost-cutting, there are still creative decisions you make which inform how your scene feels. Like, to me, it reminded me of there's like a book called The Nightland, where there's like this large like structure just in the middle of the desert, and the whole world has just become a wasteland outside of this massive tower. Because when she's coming out, it really does feel like the end of the world, you know, when she's looking out across the concrete landscape. And yeah, like you say, countries that won't be named, and the sort of buildings that get constructed in just these empty, like, barren landscapes where there's nothing to inform them or to support them. Which, it was
iconic buildings without a context.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like iconic for the sake of it. And there you see like aesthetics or sort of presentation like seeping into democracy, right? Like in that presentation. And yeah, it's nuts, right? Like we'll get to it, but she comes outside and there's just fascists like roaming this wasteland outside of the government building.
I think the aesthetics is a good segue into that section, I guess, where you suddenly have these guys who are clearly uniformed, somehow connected with the state, who are just a mob, basically, just a gang, but with some kind of official capacity. and how undemocratic that is.
Do they have an official capacity? I sort of understood them to be like the equivalent of the Proud Boys in America,
Yeah,
who
yeah,
are
yeah,
like, you know, Trump doesn't support them, wink wink, like
Mm,
yeah.
rather than having official ID government backed.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the implication. They kind of say that they're Trunheit's personal army, right?
mm,
So it's like he has, and again, he has like plausible deniability because of his separation from them. But yeah,
Mhm.
I don't think that they're like directly tied to the state, but they are tied to Trunheit's political project.
Right.
And um, yeah, it was very shocking watching it for the first time, especially in the context that we watched it the first time, because it was like, uh, you know, in the early 2020s at some point, or 2019, 2020 when we first watched it.
it was during coronavirus.
Mm,
I think it was the
yeah, yeah.
winter.
And there have been things like, you know, the Capitol riots and these sorts of things, and these paramilitary groups, or sort of informal groups of thugs that had become associated with very specific political projects
Just
were in
happened
the
in
news,
Brazil,
right?
right? With the
Yeah,
people who took over the
exactly.
capital who were Bolsonaro
Yeah,
supporters.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I think we'd
and of
had
course,
the
like,
Black Lives Matter
oh,
protests over that summer and then watched it in the autumn or something.
yeah,
mm,
yeah. So yeah, it was quite surprising seeing a show from the 80s. I mean, it shouldn't be surprising because these things don't really change. It's easy to project sort of your own disbelief into the past, but of course these groups still existed in the 80s and in the 90s. But yeah, it felt very real somehow, and the speed with which it escalates as well in the story, where they attack her, they try and kill her, and then they go to attack like someone who is ostensibly a hero of the state in his home, basically immediately. Yeah, it's all very it's all very intense, I guess. This sequence.
They do that after she makes a big speech at the president in
Mm,
that meeting,
yeah,
or during his speech. I thought it was strange that she was able to do that.
yeah, yeah,
Like she
yeah,
wasn't stopped by security.
yeah.
That the cameras didn't turn away. That sort of thing.
Hmm.
mm.
I was reminded of a scene from one of my favorite movies, The Social Network, where Andrew Garfield does his little walk up to Mark Zuckerberg,
Hmm.
um, and like because they focus on her walking up to him for a long time, I think, before
Hmm.
she starts screaming at him, which is what Andrew Garfield does in the film. Anyway, I'm saying Andrew Garfield could play Jessica Edwards in the live screen adaptation
Yeah, I
of.
mean there are already too many roles for women in a Legend of Galactic Heroes adaptation, so
Yeah.
yeah, we've got to keep it balanced. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know, like maybe I'm reading into it too much, but this sort of like the ability of a citizen to like approach the podium or to not be stopped feels to me like kind of a hangover from a more democratic time, right? Like um, that if she's allowed to do that, and then he tells the guards to take her away, and it's sort of but that like maybe in the past this was more healthy and more allowed.
Oh, I had another note about his speech, True Knight's
Yeah.
speech. He makes a lot of references to a free land and a homeland. He
Mm,
keeps saying homeland, in fact, and I thought that was sort of. Um, I couldn't imagine how that could be accurate. They're the Free
mm,
Planetary Alliance, so surely they have hundreds, thousands of homelands.
mm,
The idea of like putting all of those worlds with disparate cultures and peoples, I assume, and assimilating it, mashing it up into this idea of a homeland seems very.
yeah.
Maybe I'm reading
I
too
mean, I
much
don't
into
think.
his right wing leanings. But
No, I think that is what right-wing movements or like far-right movements do anyway, right? Like if you look at Germany and Austria before World War II, you have like a plethora of different like cultures and subcultures within that community where like Swabians didn't see themselves as like Saarlanders or these sorts of things, you know. But as a right-wing sort of, you know, authoritarian ruler, you have to bring these disparate groups under the same identity. And I think that like you basically have to invent that identity from something. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just doing the same process on a larger scale,
right.
Like it's on a sort of interplanetary scale.
I guess it was so off-putting to me. I guess I'm saying I would have been a separatist in the FBA.
Sure. Yeah.
I'd be leading it or be part of an independence movement.
Mm-hmm.
Do they while I was watching the show, I was playing the video game Citizen Sleeper. Not simultaneously, just that you know, around the same time. And have you guys played it?
No, it's on my list.
It's good. I recommend it. But they make a point in that game that you're on a a sort of rim world or whatever in the system, and the rim worlds do a job of making money for the central planets in the way that I don't know colonies did for Britain back in the day. Does the same process happen with the FPA? Are there like lesser worlds that are colonized that make money and produce things for the central powers of the FPA, or maybe for the Empire it works that way or something?
We definitely see that on the Imperial side. Like there will be episodes later on where you'll go to rural worlds or to like prison worlds, and these sorts of things. I think on the Free Planets Alliance side, you don't see that to my memory. Like you don't get to go to these sort of extractive places like where wealth is just being pulled out. But on the Imperial side, you definitely do, like later on.
So the Imperial side is more equivalent to like a colonizing empire, and the FPA is more equivalent to like an EU project or NATO or something like this.
I think so. I mean, we'll go into the history of the two sides like later on as well. But yeah, so I mean, certainly the Empire is very centralized at the beginning of the show, and there's a clear hierarchy of the planets, like where they sit. It's interesting now that you mention it because I don't remember if the show takes us to any of these places in the Free Planets Alliance that aren't really well off, or sort of. They all feel very similar. So in that sense, yeah, maybe it's more of a federalization project.
Yeah, I also can't really think of too many times it happens. I remember there being a sort of arc really late in the show, like final season maybe, where there is a planet that becomes kind of relevant that I guess is part of the Free Planets Alliance, I think. And I feel like there might be a couple of times where there's these sort of fringe planets that get traded back and forth every so often, that get explored. But I think it's definitely more explored on the Empire side than the Free Planets Alliance. But I think it's implied that the Free Planets Alliance is also quite a lot smaller than the Empire. I think.
Cool. So after the PKC nearly take out Jessica Edwards, she's saved by Yang Wen-li and Dusty Attenborough, right? In their set car. Half of my notes are honestly just like, what a sick design for this little thingy that they've got. And I make reference to the PKC having like, it looks like a Casio calculator, but they use it to track the car, I think.
Yeah. It's like a proto smartphone, right? Where they're like typing in the. Yeah.
Now, the reason I was asking earlier, like, are they government approved or not, is because why would they have a device that could track cars if they weren't like the police?
What do you mean? The police siding with a fascist paramilitary?
I guess you're right.
Yeah, I actually made a note about that as well. The fact that like they were immediately able to look up like what is presumably a police database.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah.
And it's the
They're
car
right
of
to
like
know.
a military, like high-ranking military official, right? They're like, oh, it's
Yeah,
Dusty Attenborough's car, isn't he? Like friends with Yang Wenli. They're both really
yeah,
important. Oh well, let's
yeah.
go and bomb their house anyway.
We go back to a meeting at True Knight's office, I think.
After the raid on Yang Wenli's house, yeah,
Yeah.
they go to his
Oh
residence,
yes, yeah.
his private residence.
And they call the fire brigade, right?
Yeah,
Because they try and blow up the house.
The fire brigade, the coolest of the emergency services, turns up and scares the
The fire
thugs away.
truck looked really cool. They look like Optimus Prime got a glow up. You know what I mean? It looks really good.
Have you ever seen those videos of French firefighters like beating up like fascists and police officers?
Oh,
It's like it happens quite a lot in France. It's like because the firefighters were one of the groups who stormed the Bastille. They were the ones who like broke the door down during the storming of the Bastille. So they have like a really strong tradition of protest and like anti-authoritarianism. Yeah. So I don't know if that was a reference to that. But
okay.
yeah.
He
So could you just
says
recap
something
what
like
happens at the house? Yeah.
I think so they turn up and then they have a megaphone and they demand that it's not really clear what they want. I don't think they demand that he surrenders himself or anything in particular. They just call him a traitor for harboring someone who they've recently deemed as traitorous for saying something in the this public assembly thing, and then they just throw a grenade through the window.
I think they're just trying to kill him.
Yeah, they basically just try and kill him, and he turns on the fire hydrant outside. It's very like sort of Home Alone.
Yeah.
There were a few like moments in all of these episodes where I was like, this is kind of hokier than I remember. And this was one of those bits where he sets off the fire hydrant like a booby trap. And
Did
then
this
I
episode
guess
predate Home Alone?
yeah, it must have. Probably, yeah, probably.
Ugh, the idea that Legend of the Galactic Heroes also inspired Home Alone is maybe too
What
much
hasn't
for
it
me to
inspired?
handle.
I was just gonna say,
Yeah,
like you just said that the fire truck was like Optimus Prime with a glow up, but I don't know if Optimus Prime existed at the even then. When? And yeah, I guess this fire hydrant alarm system also calls in the fire brigade, and he says that the fire brigade are always the fastest to turn up. If there's a fire, it will spread and burn down everyone's house, including the government. So they'll turn up for that, but not for the police wouldn't show up.
Okay, so after that, then we get the meeting at True Knight's office, where he has two paintings of himself behind his desk.
Yeah.
Absolute
I also
psycho
noticed
behavior.
this. Yeah. And he's like having his meeting with Yang Wenli in like a pink dressing gown.
Yeah, like he's at the Playboy Mansion or something.
With a glass of whiskey with two pictures of himself in the background. It's like a joke from like a Monty Python sketch or something. Like it's They don't really make him a complex or sympathetic character. I don't think they're there's a very single motivation behind his presentation.
And this is a meeting to approve Yang Wenli's promotion, or like force him to take it. Is that right?
No. This is just like he's saying, "Call your goons off, Jessica Edwards."
Oh right, yeah, okay.
So he's like, "I know that they're your men. You know that I know that they're your men." Neither of them say it, but then Yang Wenli is like, call them off. And then Trunheit is sort of like, well, for the hero of the alliance, I'll see what I can do.
Okay, right. He didn't try to extract any favors from him at that point.
No, but then he basically sends him off on a suicide mission, right? Which we don't get to in these 3 episodes. So he is punished for his for stepping out of line. But
well, so one thing I was thinking about was they want to promote Yang Wenli. They
Mhm.
do. And it feels like the top brass have all bought into like a hero myth surrounding him.
Mhm.
Like he's a tactical genius. He can do it all. And the the president also buying into that. I'm unclear if he actually believes it or if it's political point scoring, and he's trying to attach himself to a rising star.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's political point scoring. Maybe Tom also has an opinion, but to me, it felt like he's trying to score political points and also get rid of Yang Wenli as quickly as possible, which is why he's sort of like,
Hmm.
we'll go and take Isilon Fortress, which the Alliance has never been able to take, and do it with like half the ships that we would normally send.
I think he
So it's
he
sort of,
already recognizes him as a difficult hero. I think like he's a hero to apparently a lot of the common folk, the people of the Free Planets Alliance, as we see in the airport scene at the end where the old woman wants to talk to him, and she's telling him, oh, she wants her grandson to be a soldier, so on. But he's a difficult hero from the perspective of the politicians, because I guess it's quite clear that he doesn't really like politics or the hierarchy of power or even like the military, or he doesn't glorify war either. So I think
Yeah, doesn't he tell that kid you don't have to be a soldier or something like to that effect?
yeah,
something like, when he grows up, I hope we'll be living in a time of peace, so we won't have a need for soldiers, something like that.
That's what I tell when I meet new
yeah.
architecture students. I'm always like, I hope we live in a time of peace where we won't need you to be the architects.
In the future, we won't live in an age of buildings, so we. Yeah. I think that's actually what engineers tell each other when they're talking about construction projects.
Yeah, I think that's what I told you two before the sadly we didn't have the recording started because we were just doing our warm up. But I think I said to you that in the future I don't think we'll have podcasts. So
My son wants to grow up to be a podcaster.
Oh no!
I hope that in the future we'll live in an era without podcasts.
I liked that the airport they were at was a perfectly normal 80s airport, just completely.
Yeah.
like the triple decker
They
plane.
took they took reference photos from like an airport and then just like we'll just use this. Don't have to do any extra designs, just an airport.
I think most of the Free Planets Alliance environments look like that, and it's really grounding. Like, you have all these space battles, and then you end up back in like just a regular old 80s street or an 80s airport.
I guess I find it a bit disappointing because of how unbelievably good the vehicle design is, and like the little like miniaturized tech that they use is so cool, and then they're just in a fucking airport.
Yeah.
Do they set up a bit of like a love interest thing with Jessica Edwards and Yang Wenli at the end?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a note about it because basically Jessica Edwards tries to flirt with Yang Wenli,
Yeah,
and then he's like, "Your fiance just died, another time."
I don't know if she tries to flirt with him. She's you can tell us
she looks
there's something
hopeful
on her
into his
mind.
eyes.
Yeah.
there's a vibe.
There's a vibe. Yeah, it wasn't flirting. Yeah, it was more like longing or wistful
In another
gazing
timeline.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of good flirting is, and now let me teach you boys something about good flirting. But
at last,
I've been waiting.
Now
I've been waiting for this. Yeah.
I think part of it is like a little bit of like plausible deniability. Am I flirting or am I not? Oh, you got to think about it. So I think she's being like big brained about it.
You mean are you flirting with us now? Is that what you mean?
Well,
I'm not sure. It's plausible deniability.
No wonder my job interview went so well lately.
Such a smooth talker.
But yeah, that's episode 3. Yang Wenli heads off to, I guess, take down the Isilon Fortress. Right, that's how it ends. Which leads us to episode 4 and a redirection to the other characters, focusing on Lowengram and Siegfried. What was the title of episode 4?
Let me tell you. Let me just.
I should have put typos in all of these. I think that would be funny.
Empire's Afterglow. It's the name of the episode. Yeah, thank you, Tom. Empire's Afterglow. This episode was a fucking blast. I had forgotten how much fun this episode was to watch. Because it's like its own self-contained story.
Yeah.
And you just get to see them like being kids and how they met, and you get all this background for the story of like Lowen Graham and Kircheis. It's just a really fun episode. I had a great time watching this one.
Do either of you want to read the plot summary for it?
I will happily read it. After his overwhelming... I'm going to read all the typos, by the way.
Yeah, you should.
After his overwhelming victory at the Battle of Astarte, Reinhardt von Lohengrin returns to the Imperial capital on Odin and is promoted to the rank of Fleet Admiral and appointed as Vice Commander of the Imperial Space Fleet. Together with Siegfried Kircheis, Reinhardt visits his sister, Anna Rose von Grunwald, favoured concubine of Kaiser Friedrich IV. Kircheis contemplates the past, remembering how he first met Reinhardt with Anna Rose, how Anna Rose was taken from her family, and how the loss of his sister ignited Reinhardt's ambitions to depose the tyranny of the High Nobles and the Golden Bound dynasty. There's actually no typos.
No typos.
This episode opens with a shot of the city from overhead. That I guess Lowengraham's going to visit his sister, right? I think that's...
What's it called again? Noi something or other. It's like a... Yeah.
Anyway, the reason I bring this up is that the overhead shot of the town, the city, reminds me a lot of the Garden City movement. The idea of the utopian vision for like what towns and cities can be like, and they're all like concentric rings of like green cities, basically.
Yeah, and that's a good shout because if you go to a place like Welwyn Garden City now, it really truly is a vision of what the future should look like. Just wonderful.
And for the people who don't know what it looks like now, is it wonderful?
No, it's just sort of a rundown market town now. It's a perfectly nice place. It's funny, like when you visit and you're like, wow, this was supposed to be a utopian project, and now it just feels like High Wycombe, which there's nothing wrong with High Wycombe. It's just the juxtaposition of utopian ideals and reality in a place like Welwyn. Worth visiting though.
So many utopian visions are, maybe all of them, are associated with like failure, that I can't help but think when someone says something's utopian, they also mean that it's a failed idea.
Sure. Yeah.
Although I guess the word doesn't strictly mean that. It feels like it's implied. Like you're reaching for the stars and you will never reach it.
Are there any utopian... You'd know way better than I would. Are there any utopian projects that have succeeded? Because I feel like if a utopian project succeeds, it just becomes part of the status quo, right? Like if a radical design project succeeds, then it just becomes part of the design language that we see day to day.
What about New Donk City in Super Mario Odyssey?
I hadn't considered New Donk City, actually. That was,
The people seem happy.
Is it called New Donk City because Donkey Kong is in charge? I haven't played Mario Odyssey. Is that actually the case?
Well, he's not in charge of the city, but I think it's meant to be like the same town where, Jumpman first had to save the princess from Donkey Kong. Like, the construction is still there and stuff.
I mean, I guess if you're going to sort of construct a utopian society, then you need some sort of benevolent dictator like Donkey Kong. It may be a good segue into back on track to our...
Donkey Kong is something of also a Taoist fool archetype, which I would argue.
You know what? The current Donkey Kong.
But he wears a tie.
He wears a tie. So yeah, that's true.
He's the second one, I think. As in the first Donkey Kong from the original Donkey Kong arcade game became Cranky Kong, and Donkey Kong Jr. became Donkey Kong. I don't think I'm making this up.
I see.
I mean,
It's a rich inheritance.
they're all in the Donkey Kong, the DK rap, aren't they? So that's how you can remember them all.
I haven't thought about the DK rap in a long time.
I think we should use that as our outro song for this episode.
Yeah, all right, I'll do that. No problem. That's done deal.
Yeah. Okay, let's get back on track.
Utopian Garden City, yeah. So they go and meet Anna Rose. What do we think of her? Not Joel. What do you think of Anna Rose so far, Kamal?
Okay, we'll get to her in a minute, but I think before that, it's his promotion ceremony, right? Lowengram.
Oh yeah, does that happen first?
Yeah.
Crazy ass promotion ceremony.
Mhm.
Big white supremacist vibes. The whole place, from just the whole vibe of the ceremony, felt that way to me. I would not want to be there. And we meet the
To me,
Kaiser.
it felt normal.
We meet the Kaiser for the first time at that ceremony. He's the fourth of his name. I'm just meant to assume that he's the fourth with that name, right? He's not the fourth Kaiser. He's not the fourth leader of this empire.
I think he's just the fourth Friedrich, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But I can't remember if they're all called Friedrich. But no,
I don't think they are, yeah. I think he's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of Kaisers.
Yeah, I think so.
He gets promoted. There's a bit of like... what do you call it?
Shit talking. Are we PG-13? You can bleep that one out.
No, I think it's fine. I think I've probably sworn before this. We meet Paul von Oberstein.
Oh yeah. We meet Oberstein
with the laser eyes.
Yeah, he's got some Terminator eyes, right? Yeah.
I just wrote in my notebook, Oberstein is here, so I wouldn't forget. But yes,
that's crazy because if he got your notebook, that's also what he would write, like graffiti.
I think that. Yeah, right.
And he brings up, so he has the eyes because of the Inferior Genes Exclusion Act.
Well, not because of, but it's like a sign that the Empire is changing, right? Yeah. So, like, I think the implication is that this Genes Exclusion Act, or this genetic, like, it's basically eugenicist law, is still on the books technically. Like, you still can be executed for having quote unquote inferior genes, but it doesn't seem enforced anymore, because he says if it had been like the previous Kaiser, I would have been put to death.
Oh, does he say that? I thought he meant that he just wouldn't be accepted into the military, but maybe I was not paying attention.
Maybe he wouldn't be killed, but yeah, maybe he would be kept away from office. Yeah. But I guess he is also supposed to represent how the Empire's attitudes are changing slowly, away from this like hardline eugenics to something more meritocratic, where someone like Oberstein can rise through the ranks.
And this is due to Frederick IV.
Yeah, I don't think it's because of him. I think it's just kind of a cultural shift that's been taking place, because Lowengram is also a member of this movement, right? We find out later in the series, or later in the episode, that he is like a really poor, from a really poor noble family. Like he was in like that little middle class house next door to Kircheis' family, and yet now he's like in charge of half of the space fleet in this episode. So clearly, like, the Empire is becoming more meritocratic as time goes on.
I guess I'm asking if it was Frederick IV who instigated this, movement towards quote unquote progressivism by not doing eugenics anymore. Like, if that's comparable to like how people would talk about MBS in Saudi Arabia, and like, wow, what a progressivist he is because he lets women drive.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, he's doing what he does to journalists and stuff.
Yeah. I don't think we find out that it was Friedrich's fault, or like Friedrich's intentional. Like, I don't want to spoil anything too heavily, but my reading is more that like the role of Kaiser has become so decadent and divorced from actual decision making over time.
More of a British royal.
That like these entryists and like lower nobles have been able to like sneak their way into like powerful positions, because the family has lost some legitimacy over time.
Yeah, I think his character Friedrich the Fourth, which it's not really explored in this episode, but maybe it is a little bit in a future episode, is that he's also just kind of not really particularly interested in much anymore. He just happens to be Kaiser, and stuff happens around him, and he's quite passive. So I think this cultural shift of one is taking place going on around him and in spite of him, and he doesn't really feel one way or the other particularly.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So after the that ceremony where he's promoted, he's like, I gotta get out of here. I'm feeling suffocated by all these military
It's
guys.
cramping my vibe.
And so he and Siegfried jump in his Mercedes.
Yeah.
Because of course it's a Mercedes. Like not a nice looking one either. Like these guys need to rip off the FPA industrial designers, because those guys have the cool,
space cars.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And he heads off to see his sister, right, at the mansion or whatever. I do not like the vibe between Lowengram and his sister at all. I really don't like seeing them interact. It's really strange to me and off-putting. There's something really weird about it.
Would you like to elaborate what you think is weird, or are you just going to leave that?
Sometimes you hear about how like incestuous royal families can be.
Yeah.
And the scenes between them don't disprove that idea to me, I guess. I just don't like it.
I will I'm not going to leave you hanging. I will reassure you that there is no that isn't a plot in the show.
Okay, that's fine, good. But
yeah.
I still don't like how the voice actors and writers and animators choose to how they speak to each other and how they interact. Maybe it's just that they're both weirdos, and
sure,
and that's how they interact. Who am I to judge,
Also, you know how posh white families are. It's
yeah, I think it does have that vibe a little bit, and I think maybe some of this is over exaggerated to really show Lowengram in a position of being vulnerable and immature and like he's a child again. And as the series continues, and even at the moment, he's got such responsibility that he doesn't really have that. He's had to grow. He's grown up very fast. He's like a 20-year-old, and he's in charge of half of the space fleet now. But when he's back with his older sister, he's basically just a child again.
Right.
And he seems happy, and he seems, he's joking and he's laughing and he's getting champagne from the cellar and making fun of people and eating cake and stuff.
Well, that much I can understand. I guess I thought it was odd just because, like, when you write a character who's 20 years old and he runs half the military and he's like ascending to power, he's a military genius, never loses a battle. He's golden haired. They make reference to that all the time. Everyone just never says his name. They just refer to him as golden haired. I think you can't help but, or at least I can't because I've been researching him lately. But I can't help but think about Alexander the Great. And didn't he marry his sister? Didn't he have like a sister wife at some point, or maybe his father did, or someone like that?
I actually don't know.
So maybe that was just in my head, and that comparison was sitting there.
I definitely don't think that Alexander the Great comparison is inappropriate. I didn't know that about the incest thing with Alexander the Great, but
I think it's kind of common, right, for pharaohs, like to
I
don't know.
Yeah. Keep like other families from vying for the throne. But yeah, that you don't need to worry. There is not going to be an incest plot. But yeah, their relationship is a little unnatural, maybe.
It's when they all meet up that it goes into a flashback, right? Or was there anything before that?
I think so.
Yeah, I think the flashback starts quite quickly when he's looking at the flowers.
And that's the bulk of the story for the episode is this flashback from when Siegfried is a kid, and new neighbors have moved in, and he meets young Lowengram for the first time. Although he's not referred to as Lowengram, right? He's referred to as a different last
Von
name.
Musel.
Von Musel.
Yeah.
I thought that was. I didn't understand that. Was Lowengram like a title, or did he change his name, or?
I think it's not super important, but it will come up like explicitly later in the show
Okay.
that the actual family name was von Musel, but when his sister became concubine to the Kaiser, she took on like a concubine's name, and then he takes on her name, like
by choice or because he has to by.
I think by choice.
Okay.
Like reclaims it. I don't really remember.
Yeah, and this is part of the reason why everyone's like, oh, he's only getting favor because his sister is like the Kaiser's favorite and all this kind of stuff. Because it's sort of like riding on the coattails of his sister, which obviously we see that he isn't really doing through the flashback and through all that stuff. But yes, yeah. So his family are down on their luck, and they have to move in next to a middle class family,
quote unquote, down on their luck.
Yeah, compared
to big houses in the countryside and
yeah.
So Siegfried and what's Lohengram's first name?
Reinhardt.
Thank you. They meet for the first time. There's something about this anime that they decide to draw children with giant heads, which is a bit off-putting to me. Their heads are so big.
Have you never met a child, Kamal?
I guess not.
Big heads. Yeah.
I guess not. But maybe that's like artist brain, because when you meet Reinhardt, he has a big head, like figuratively. You know what I mean?
So deep.
He's like the boy king. Like he already thinks everyone is, centered around him. Because he just decides, what's your name, Siegfried? Fuck that. I'm gonna call you whatever your last name is. That's way better, Dick. And Siegfried's like, hell yeah, I love this guy.
I actually, this is one of the few times I actually understood someone speaking Japanese in the show, because when he comes out and he greets Kircheis, I think he just says "namai." He doesn't even ask like, "What's your name?"
Mm-hmm.
He just says like, he's basically like coming outside and saying "name."
Yeah,
like it's like it's so unbelievably rude, and yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I made a comment about it in my notebook.
Siegfried's sort of like, it seemed in my memory, Siegfried's like a little bit off-put by him at first.
Yeah.
Oh, but then he meets Reinhardt's sister, and he's like, "Damn, now I got to be friends with him because I love her. She's the first girl who's ever looked at me and touched me, so I got to run away back to my bedroom to freak out."
Yeah.
There's something about this guy's sister that I find very attractive. Can we talk about The Rock? I feel like we're jumping ahead a little bit.
It's definitely ahead of it. What else happens?
Okay, no,
they see each other in class first, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Reinhardt slaps the shit out of that kid.
He slaps a boy.
Yeah.
I think it's very like, obviously I don't think flashbacks are like inherently efficient storytelling, but they do make every scene sing in this flashback. Like you learn something new about his character, like in every single scene or every single sequence.
I don't know that I learned anything new about Reinhardt, to be honest. I probably could have guessed that was in his backstory.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Well, the important thing you learn, it happens at the end of the flashback, which we'll get to. But that his character was always like this is a bit interesting to me. Like since birth, he seems to have always thought he's better than everyone. Yeah, nothing made him that way, I guess, besides like the environment he grew up in.
But I think that like it's very clear from these scenes that Kircheis is like a regulating influence on him. That like he's constantly trying to get him out of trouble, constantly calming him down, like stepping in when he's being violent.
I guess I would argue that that's more like just keeping him below the red line enough that it enables him to be that way all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kircheis is drawn to his like directness and his aggression, right? Like it's clearly like a part of what he values in him. Because Kircheis is not really like that.
Now you want to talk about The Rock?
We can talk about the other stuff first, but it's just the rock. I had forgotten the rock scene.
Well, what happens before the rock?
When he slaps the boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he kicks a guy in the crotch and then starts beating the back of his head with a rock.
Yeah.
Until he draws blood. And it's only because Kircheis steps in and stops him that this boy is not killed, basically.
Yeah.
And when Kircheis turns up, Lonegram just lets the guy go, drops the rock, and then he's like, "Oh, hey, how's it going?"
Doesn't he say like, "Damn, I got red on my shirt" or something like that?
Yeah, basically, yeah. It's like, oh, blood on my shirt. What am I going to do? Yeah.
Is Siegfried's freaked out by his demeanor?
I think so, but not like as much as maybe he should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Siegfried's just along for the ride, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Although that said, in episode 5, as we'll see, he's very capable on his own.
So is it at this point that like Reinhardt goes home and finds out what's happened with his sister?
Yeah, I think so. Well, first of all, they play in the fountain, and it's the gayest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like the show disintegrates into like watercolor sketches of the characters
like stars
with like
around them and stuff,
splashing in the water, and it's like, this is just text. It's not subtext. Like,
don't they take a bath together?
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Or not a bath, but they're like sitting in the bed together, with like drinking tea.
But they're naked.
Yeah, but they're naked. Yeah.
I didn't do this with my friends when I was 12.
No, me either.
Joel,
No.
come on.
Oh no, I did plenty of plotting to take over the galaxy, but never.
I guess my thought is that normal? Like in Japan, when like how they'll show scenes of like families bathing together, like, and that's normal.
Yeah, it is normal here in Japan.
So is that scene meant to be like one of those normal things that I just wouldn't get?
I think it's just supposed to be normal. I don't think that like that kind of stuff is not like weird at all.
Gotcha.
The playing in the fountain, the way that the playing in the fountain is framed is like definitely intentionally romanticized and this kind of stuff. But yeah, no, like the bathing scenes or whatever are just like, in Japan, I think it's very normal.
I think we do see that thing through the lens of just the writers and the show writers being Japanese. But I think this also would have been way more common in Europe
in the past.
Not so much in the UK for a long time, but still in other parts of Europe, I think.
Yeah.
And is at this point that Reinhardt finds out what's happened with his sister?
I think so. Or they're like running to go and get cake. And then they get home and there's no cake. And his sister has been sold to the Kaiser. It's actually a pretty like depressing scene when he comes in and sees his father like beside himself, and drinking, with like the gold on the table and stuff.
It seems like the father's been forced to sell her, right? He didn't really have a choice.
It's like it's kind of he's definitely been forced, but like I wrote that like even this like lower noble family are not like free of the brutality of authoritarianism. Like, this person has just come in and demanded something, and even despite their status, they can't refuse him. It's surprisingly effective, I think. And the coins on the table and stuff, it all made me think of like it's like a Judas image, right? Like with the pieces of silver. I don't know if it was intentional, but definitely felt like.
I think the dad doesn't even look at the bag of gold at any time in the scene.
No,
he says something like, "Well, at least I got some money, but I couldn't have done anything anyway." He doesn't really seem to care about it. And when Reinhardt like smashes it across the table again, he just doesn't react.
He doesn't go to pick them up.
So I think he doesn't really care about the money either. He just didn't have a choice.
And then Reinhardt goes to see his sister, who's playing the piano sadly.
Yes, and I think it kind of recontextualizes a lot of what you've heard about him so far, right, from the other generals in the present day in the story. When they're talking about he's using his sister's position
Right.
to advance his own career and all this kind of stuff. And you see how unwillingly he was thrown into that situation, and how unwillingly she was thrown into that situation.
Prior to this moment, did Reinhardt have any aspirations to being a soldier?
It doesn't seem that way, right? Because when they're on the hill at the very end of the episode, he says, like, I'm going to quit school and I'm going to become a soldier.
Yeah.
It's only after all of these things that he makes that decision.
So this is another mirroring point for Yang Wenli and Reinhardt, that neither of them had aspirations to be the people they are.
Yeah. Although I think Reinhardt is a lot more attracted to power and would have been regardless. I think it's already sort of demonstrated in his character up till then that he can be violent and aggressive, and he'll kind of do anything to get his own way. And then it gets kind of accelerated when his sister's taken away, and he says, "This is the quickest route to power for me. Become a soldier," and that's when he makes his decision. So maybe in a different, if other things had happened, he would have gone on a slower journey to power or something like that. I think it's more part of his character than Yang Wenli.
Yeah, I guess his military service is not based on any sort of like national pride or anything like that.
Sure. Yeah.
That seems unimportant to him. It seems purely about his sister and like gaining the power necessary to protect her, save her, whatever. Like,
I think he's also driven by some amount of revenge. I mean, it's connected to his sister being taken away, but it seems like it's not just about getting her back. It's also about, through this incident, discovering how what the other nobles are like, with all these people dying at war, and they're just sitting around and ignoring the whole thing. And he does see this as a injustice or something like that, that he wants to remove. And we see that in the next episode, I think, when where he assembles his his team of whatever they are, admirals or whoever they are, but just beneath him, and he chooses kind of more common or more competent people than would have been chosen traditionally.
I see. So you're saying he hates the existing power structure that sits atop the Empire.
Yeah, I don't know, hate particularly, but at least he doesn't respect it, and he thinks it's kind of, I don't know, wrong or immoral or something. Or
yeah, I mean, it's kind of like he sees it as like wasteful, right? Like this nobility on the top. He sees it as like wasteful and idle, because when they're in the bushes or whatever and they're watching the
garden party,
the garden party, he's like, aren't there people dying on the other side of the galaxy? And it's like none of these people care because they don't have to send anyone to fight. And yeah, as Tom says, I mean, the show makes a point of telling us that his staff are made up of people from the middle class or from like lower nobility,
right?
People who traditionally would not have been able to get these positions, but who he's promoted on their ability, not on their birth. So he clearly has some. It's kind of a bourgeoisie revolution, but he has some revolutionary aspirations from that angle. But
he's ascending in power and like dropping the ladder behind him for others to climb up.
Sure. Yeah, to an extent.
Yeah.
Not dropping it super far.
Yeah, a couple steps.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed that when they're hiding in the bushes, this was a little visual touch I really liked, which I thought was, I don't know, I'm not an expert in animation, but it seems ahead of its time for 1980, whatever. They did a rack focus where like it focuses on the leaves of the bushes, but then switches focus to the two boys behind the bushes.
Oh, I see.
Which you can do with a camera easily. I guess you could do it
with animation.
Yeah, you can do it with animation just using two separate cells and, I don't know, digitally blurring out one or the other. But I thought it was ahead of its time.
I think they do this another point in the episode, because I noticed this when Anna Rose gets, I can't remember, it's in the bit where she's, I don't know if she's getting taken away or they see the car or something, and they're both frozen to the road, and in the background Kircheis is kind of blurred out and Reinhardt's in front of him and in focus, and then it like switches, so you get like the focus on Kircheis and his expression at the back. So yeah, maybe it's something they were playing with at the time.
They do it again in episode 5 as well. So
really?
Definitely an effect that they drop in.
Mm.
It's nice because in anime usually everything's in infinite focus. Like there is no
Yeah.
depth of field or whatever.
Mm.
I forgot to mention in the very beginning of this episode, before Reinhardt's ceremony, him and Kircheis are having a little conversation, and it just made me laugh. Like the whole conversation made me laugh. Like how sneaky they're both being. Like it felt like it should have been from like a Hanna-Barbera cartoon or something. Like they're like, yeah, depends who's on the throne then. And then like Reinhardt like narrows his eyes, and then Kircheis like narrows his eyes, and the camera's like zoomed in on both of their eyes, and then it goes back to Reinhardt, and he's like smiling. The whole sequence just really, yeah, it felt very like comedically timed.
Is it like that episode of The Simpsons where at the very end it like does a massive zoom in on the dog and the dog is doing like shifty eyes left and right?
Mm. It kind of reminds me of the episode of The Simpsons where they're like guarding the museum from. Oh no, yeah, like the cubit zirconia is about to be stolen, and Skinner is like, "I've checked the perimeter, everything's safe," or something like this, and then Homer's like, "How do you know?" "Because I checked it." And they both like nod to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of that.
I guess right before Anna Rose heads off to go be concubine,
Mm.
she like tells Siegfried, "Hey, take care of my brother for me," right?
Yeah.
And that becomes his guiding motivation in life because the girl he liked said, "Do this." That's sort of how I read it. Like,
I think it's a bit of everything, right? Like I think it's, I don't know. I mean, I'll die on this hill that I think that the romance between Kircheis and Lowengram is completely intentionally written into the show,
mhm.
and that like the it's not homo, bro. I like your sister. Um, like subplot going on is basically like plausible deniability for something that was very obviously coded to be a romantic relationship, or at least a
Yeah,
loving relationship.
I think so. Like little interaction actually happens between Kircheis and Anna Rose at any point that we've seen so far, at least. That I kind of read it as his personal excuse for sticking with Lowengram, who actually has this connection with, or admiration for, or romance with. Um, although I don't know if he ever really says too much out loud about his feelings for Anna Rose. It's also just we're told that as an audience. It's there, but I think there's yeah, it's not really his sole motivation, even if he kind of believes that it is to an extent. But
Yeah, to me, it felt like a mixture of things. Like it's this fascination with Lowengram because he's obviously a very exciting person to be around.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's also like he rises so far because there's kind of as I say, like he's sort of this middle class person at the beginning of the story with a sort of very well to do family, but like no, um, certainly not like close to the throne or anything like that. And so it becomes this way of sort of riding along and having this interesting life um, along with him. But I think, yeah, I mean, I think that you'll see in the later episodes that profoundly he is motivated by a genuine love for Lowengram. Like it's not like fake or anything. You know, like it's not because his sister told him
Right.
to look after him. And I think Lowengram is much worse at articulating it or acknowledging it, but he also relies upon like Kircheis. It's kind of this codependent relationship where the two of them need each other, and yeah. So I think we'll see all of that as we go on.
I think there's already like a interesting conflict in their values as well that's present in this flashback episode, where you and also the next episode as well, where you're kind of supposed to see Kircheis as this very good person, this very moral person, and kind of a kind person, and Reinhardt just isn't that. He's not like the worst, but he's violent and he's aggressive and he's not always that nice. He's rude, and he still is those things when he's a 20-year-old, even in the same way that he was when he was a young boy. But there's something about his ability to take action and his ambition and the sense of justice that he does have against the aristocratic families, that I think Kircheis kind of like latches onto or reads into and thinks Reinhardt is this. He also he has the same values as me or something, and I kind of read this into his part of his fascination with him. That he's they're on the same page or something. These two people who are going to change everything, make things better, and the world will become fairer. But I think their value systems are slightly different.
Well, they've come to the same conclusion from different starting points.
Maybe, yeah.
I have one last note about this episode before we get to episode 5, and it's that the VA for Anaros in the Japanese sounds so much like the main girl from Tokimeki Memorial from Action Button Reviews videos of that game. Like those voices are indistinguishable to me. That's it. That's all I have.
Are they the same person?
Did you look it up?
Did you look it up?
Oh no, that would be professional.
Oh, I see.
For me to do that, so I didn't.
Yeah.
That could have been our corrections for next episode. I don't know if we have corrections from last. So
Have an errata, yeah.
That would be too professional.
Yeah.
Just people will write in. People will write in if they have something to complain about. I'm sure.
Yeah, you're actually wrong about the firefighters storming the Bastille. They didn't do that. Also, you're wrong about Alexander and his sister wife. That didn't happen. It's a common misconception. Yeah. We'll hear about it.
I'm looking forward to it. Until then, we've got episode 5, which is titled. My Google Doc crashed.
The Kastrop Rebellion. I think Tom, you're the only one who hasn't done a reading so far.
Hasn't done anything. Okay, I can read this. Are you ready?
Make sure you read out the typos.
Yeah, if there are any, I'll read them out. Episode 5, The Kastrop Rebellion. Reinhard von Lohengram assembles his new admiralty, choosing subordinate officers of both common and noble birth. Oh my god. Namely, August Samuel Warlen, Cornelius Lutz, Carl Gustav Kempf, Fritz Joseph Bittenfeld, Ernest Mecklinger, Wolfgang Mittermeier, and Oskar von Roenthal. Elsewhere, Maximilian von Kastrop rebels against the Empire. Reinhardt is ordered to put down the revolt. He dispatches Siegfried Kircheis and a small fleet to defeat Kastrop. Kircheis succeeds in destroying the impregnable Artemis necklace by engulfing the battle satellites of the necklace with directional Zephyr particles and igniting them, which greatly demoralizes the rebels. Kastrop is then murdered by his retainers, ending the rebellion with only one casualty. For his efforts, Kircheis is promoted to the rank of Vice Admiral. This script says cephal particles. But,
yeah, there's one typo, yeah. Cephal particles.
But in the subtitles that I had, it's Zephyr. And what
Zephyr,
I don't know what the
in the subtitles I had, it was cephal. Like
the really?
Written, yeah.
So
I thought that was fine.
Maybe is that just the German?
It must be Zephyr because that actually means something.
Zephyr sounds more right.
Cephal. This is the Legend of Galactic Heroes wiki. Cephal particles.
Yeah.
Japanese Zephyru are highly explosive.
It's got to be Zephyr.
Oh no, it's a Zephyru. Yeah, it's a Z.
Yeah.
So I think it's supposed
to. So it's just people are like, actually, the original Japanese is closer to Cephal, so we're going to go with that.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it is really close to that.
Nerd.
Yeah. There's a whole there's a Reddit thread here about what it's called. Okay, that's not.
That's so funny. When I read cephal, I thought that was like named after the German scientist who invented them. Like that's so
funny. To that flashback. Yep.
The episode opens with the narrator giving like a breakdown of the former Minister of Finance embezzling like the state coffers, which then the state tries to give back, but his son was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm keeping the cash. Which just felt very Phantom Menace to me, like to open with discussion of trade routes and stuff in a space opera.
Yeah, the opening of this episode is very like, oh, okay, wow, whiplash. We've just gone from like this personal drama to, discussions of taxes and embezzlement. And,
But then I think you get like another whiplash, right? Like you have this, you're like, oh wow, okay, this has got very economics based, and you're like, right, okay, now I'm ready to get myself set, and then you're just in like ancient Rome, the planet. You're like, oh, that's not what I was expecting either.
So we've already spoiled it by reading the thing, but I remember when we watched this the first time, I was like, oh right, this guy's going to get stabbed by everyone around him. They're just doing a Julius Caesar. That's why he's in a toga. That's the whole reason. It's just a stupid aesthetic thing.
Like, I think at the time I was like, no, that can't. That's not what's going to happen. That's too obvious.
That can't be what they're going to do. That's too obvious.
To be honest, I didn't get that at first because I thought they were doing Greece.
So I think they slightly confused the two because like the outside looks closer to like the Acropolis, right? Like on the hill and stuff. But I think that their togas are like supposed to be Roman, right?
Gotcha. I don't think I realized that they were doing Julius Caesar till I saw the knife on the ground at the end of the episode.
The foreshadowing.
Why is that knife there?
Chekhov's knife, yeah.
They introduced Maximilian, the son of that former Minister of Finance. Maximilian, classic bad guy name.
That's a really good bad guy name.
And he's like chilling out while the Empire has sent a fleet of ships, 3,000 ships, to come take them out and be like, pay up, you know. And then he introduces his chain of orbital lasers around the planet called the Artemis Necklace, which destroys that fleet of ships. Now, I hope you boys watched that YouTube video I sent about orbital lasers by Jacob Geller. That, wow, really would have been useful for this episode.
I did not watch it.
It's fine.
I didn't watch it. I'm sorry.
It's fine. It's a good video. You should. It's just he just sort of summarizes the history of like orbital lasers in media, and relates them to the Ronald Reagan's Star Wars program, which is space lasers to take out missiles. And his whole point was like space lasers are cool, like they look cool as hell, but in media they're often depicted as just functionally ineffective. Like they never do the thing you want them to do, either practically, or if they do it practically, then all it does is like, when you build the weapon to end the war, all that does is create new weapons and increases the arms race. So the weapon to end weapons, the orbital laser, never works.
Do you mean it never works in media or never works in real life?
Well, both.
Yeah.
Like even the most famous examples in Akira, which he covers, is like it fucking does nothing. Like it makes a Tetsuo or Kaneda, one of them, it makes them mad, is all it does. So and in Gears of War it doesn't work. Those are probably the two most famous examples in recent stuff. And here I guess it works the first time and it really doesn't work the second time. Although I think it's kind of interesting that orbital lasers are usually depicted as facing down back towards the planet,
Sure.
And this is a chain of them facing outwards.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of cool. They're doing like a whole Greek thing, and then they named their weapon after the Greek god of hunting, Artemis, right?
Yeah.
And they shoot lasers, which I guess are arrows of light.
When you think about it, that's all a laser really is.
Anyway, I just thought that was really cool. That's all I had about the lasers.
I will watch the video about orbital lasers. I'm reasonably familiar with the Star Wars project because I just think it's really fascinating. But yeah, I will watch the video. Maybe we can talk about it because there will be more orbital lasers in this show.
One fun thing from that orbital lasers video is it talks about how the Reagan administration used it as part of their, negotiations with the Soviet Union. And they were like, hey, if you do these things for us, we won't build it, and you don't want us to build it. And the Russian, premier was like, do what you want. I don't care. It's not going to work. If you want to spend your money to do that, do it. I don't care.
Yeah.
Which I thought was funny. And they did try and make it and it didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the time, well, even now, there are like really good reasons why it doesn't work very well. And it's mostly just to do with like delivering energy to such a small platform. Like in order to push all that energy through a laser, you need so much energy going through your system. And you just don't really have the storage density on a satellite currently. to be able to do it for anything more than just like punching a hole through some metal. So yeah,
Pretty sick if you could punch a hole through some metal from space, though.
Sure. Yeah.
The world's biggest laser cutter.
You just use it like to like etch something into
from space.
Yeah, just like Gorbachev sucks, into the.
That sounds like a Simpsons joke.
Yeah. Episode 5. I actually don't really like this episode very much. I think it's okay. Like, to me, it's like a self-contained story, right? Like, none of these characters, apart from the Mariendorfs, whose presence is somewhat incidental, and they only get like a couple of shoe-in lines, actually get introduced or are important.
Yeah, I wouldn't have remembered that this is where they get introduced if I hadn't already known who they are.
Yeah.
Sorry, who is this?
So on this planet, they've got they're holding captive or like a political prisoner, right? I don't really know why they've got hold of him. Count Mariendorf, who's just some other noble, but he reappears later in the show, as is his daughter, who's in that episode, which she meets him when he's freed or whatever. Yeah, they don't really get much more screen time than that, but that's where they're first introduced.
Yeah, wild. Obviously, we get the introduction to just a gang of Germans at the beginning, where we just get like their names like one by one. You're just expected to remember them.
To be honest, when Tom was reading that out, I did feel like I was hearing a reading from like the Nuremberg trials or something like that.
Yeah. There's like, I think the main like conflict or interesting part of this episode is the Bergengruen like thing.
Right, yeah,
where he's
the drunk guy.
He's the drunk guy, where he's like he's wrecked and he's like being antagonistic and questioning the authority of Kircheis and all this kind of stuff.
My favorite thing about him is that he is like a functioning or not alcoholic throughout the episode. He's like, what's this red-haired dude gonna do?
Yeah.
And by the end, he's so impressed by Siegfried, he gives up his alcohol. He's like, I'm going teetotal. I believe in this man.
Yeah, I when I saw him again, when he appears, I was like, it's this episode. Yeah, I remember this, but I didn't remember it like that. I remembered it being a little more like drawn out. Like over time, he was convinced by Siegfried's ability, and it took some time, and there were more conflicts that happened in the episode. But he basically just goes to the bridge drunk, and he's a bit disruptive. And then Kircheis is like, actually, this is my secret plan. And it's all like, just like a kind of trap. It's like a trick. It's like a clever plan. And he sees it and he's like, huh. And that just changes his mind in that moment. He's like, he just finds it's funny. He knows
a good plan when he sees it. He knows a good plan when he sees it, I kind of read it as like he had been under such terrible leadership, like for so long, and was so desperate for someone to come along with any sort of plan.
Yeah.
That just like the fact that Kircheis had a diagram, like.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed this in my own work from time to time, that you turn up something and give it a shot.
Sometimes if someone turns up with PowerPoint slides, you're like, fuck. This guy really knows what he's doing.
Finally, something to believe in.
Yeah. That's how it felt to me. And I can relate, to every aspect of Bergengren's character, really. Yeah.
Apart from the bit where he gives up the alcohol. Just puts it in the bin as half a bottle. Yeah.
I was thinking, what a waste.
You could have given it away.
Yeah, exactly.
He just dumps it in that kind of cool bin that's like built into the wall.
With the lid off as well. Like he just throws that bottle in there with the lid
Maybe
off.
It was a fridge.
It's just going to spill inside.
Maybe it looks like a bin to us, but maybe in the future or in the past, it's actually a cupboard.
It revealed itself from the wall with a foot pedal that's also like embedded in the floor.
Hmm.
It's a bit like, I don't know if if you've used the toilets at the Barbican.
Yes, yeah, I do know what you mean.
Probably.
Actually, yeah,
They've got foot
they have foot
pedals
pedals.
there
Yeah.
to operate things.
Oh, that's cool. The Barbican rules.
Yeah.
It shouldn't go off topic, but that building is so cool.
It's very cool. They used it as a lot of the set locations for Andor, the Star Wars show.
I read about that. Yeah.
It's very cool.
Because I saw a clip from Andor and I saw the bridge from the Barbican.
Yeah.
And I was like, that looks a lot like the Barbican bridge. Yeah.
I think they shot all
Yeah, I
over
read about
the UK because like there's bits that are clearly like Scottish mountains or something, and
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
like a seaside town from like, I don't know, East Sussex or something.
Yeah, I mean, Pine Ridge Studios were involved in the original Star Wars like quite heavily, right? So
Pinewood.
Yeah.
My friend. Pinewood.
or Pinewood.
Yeah.
What's Pine Ridge?
Something you made up in your brain.
That's it.
So this episode's really about Reinhardt giving Siegfried a battalion of 2,000 ships to, deal with the problem with Maximilian on that fake Greece world. Now, I thought when they first introduced the idea of only giving him 2,000 ships when the first 3,000 failed was a bit of like political maneuvering, because it's like, well, if he can do it with 2,000, then great, he's so good, because they couldn't do it with 3,000. Then they sort of reveal that the plan they use was given to them by Fezzan, the state that sold the Artemis necklace in the first place.
Yeah, it's kind of strongly implied, right? Like at the very end, where he's like, how did they know about this weakness? And the guy's like, oh, what, me? Oops.
That sounds like some plausible deniability right there.
Yeah.
So that means to me that like Lohengrin had the plan from the beginning. Like he was never worried.
Yeah. Which explains everyone's behavior in this episode, right?
Yeah.
Because Kircheis is just super chill the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It sort of implies to me though that as a whole that this level of confidence will lead to hubris that will upset Lohengrin at some point. Like he seems so supremely confident at all times. Maybe, by like he should be. Like Michael Jordan was always confident. Like I feel like that will be an exploit that Yang Wen-li will use at some point.
I mean, I think, like historically, that's been the failure of a lot of generals, right? Like, if you win a lot of battles, you start to believe your own hype. So, yeah, I think it's definitely, you see it beginning to happen.
Well, if the Alexander the Great comparison holds, that guy went like 21-0. He never lost. In fact, the only thing that beat him was his own megalomania, where he thought he was God King, and then maybe syphilis. We don't know, but that's what.
And also, he tried to start a baseball career, and it just like he wasn't that good at baseball. Like he was fine, but
no, the people he paid to speak in that documentary about it said he would have gone pro. He would have been like he would have gone to the major leagues. So we can trust that assessment. I like that. And we're now comparing Michael Jordan to Alexander the Great as well. That's good.
I don't think Michael Jordan played baseball. I mean, I don't know, but
he did.
Yeah,
famously.
He played for 18 months.
Yeah, the joke is that Michael Jordan tried to convert to baseball at the end of his career.
Oh,
because he was like, I'm so good at basketball, I can do anything.
I see. Okay,
well, not to go off topic, but it's because his father died. His father always wanted him to be a baseball player. He had just won 3 basketball championships in a row, so he was like, well, what, I'm the best. What else is there to do?
I see.
So he goes to play baseball. Never quite gets all the way to AAA. I think he gets AA. And
still pretty good.
It's not bad for someone who just switched. And then 18 months later, he sends a press release to like the press saying, I'm back. And then he just starts playing basketball again, and then wins 3 more championships in a row. There's a lot of rumors that it was due to like gambling debts and stuff, and that's why he had to switch and like get out. During that break, he also shot the Space Jam movie, and like I think the Space Jam movie opens with him playing baseball, and he's like really shit at it, and that's why he gets sucked into Looney Tunes world and has to play with Bugs and Daffy and like beat the Monstars.
Can you imagine like you've just made the transition to baseball? You're really like you're feeling a little down about it because you're not really making the headway that you might have hoped you would. And then Michael Eisner comes along and he gives you a script. He's like, so The film opens with you just sucking ass at baseball. That's
And
how
Michael
it
Jordan's
opens.
like, oh, but then I overcome it, and I do like a Rocky, and then by the end I'm really good at baseball. It's like, no. The film's about you playing basketball.
You get summoned into another dimension to play basketball instead of playing baseball.
I think at the end he doesn't ever go back to baseball as well. Like that's just done.
Life reflects art, That's what they say.
Anyway, back to our Legend.
Yeah,
of the
well,
Galactic
I mean,
Heroes
I obviously knew
discuss.
all of that about Michael Jordan, but I'm glad you explained it for the audience.
I mean, what is there to say about this episode? They fire a bunch of. Oh, is Kamel frozen?
Oh, maybe.
No,
No.
I was thinking.
Deep in thought.
Sorry, I'm frozen in life.
I can't remember why we. Oh, hubris. I see. And maybe it's on the horizon.
Anyway, Siegfried takes the fleet of 2000 to do his secret plan against Maximilian. Could one of you explain to me the secret? I don't think I quite understood what happened with it.
So the Zephyr particles,
yeah,
or cephal particles, depending on which dub or which sub you're watching. These are basically like the show's solve everything like plot device.
Yeah, I think we talked about this last time, that they were going to come up and hit lo and gram and behold.
Very good.
Do they come up repeatedly after this?
Yeah, they come up repeatedly. So it's basically like an explosive gas. And if it has contact with anything like hot, then it explodes. It's kind of the same solution to the question of how do we have, I think we talked about this last episode, but how do we have melee fights in space? Like Dune has the shield technology, and in Legend of Galactic Heroes, it's Zephyr particles. So like if your ship gets boarded, you just flood the ship with Zephyr particles. So if anyone shoots a gun or shoots a laser, then the whole ship will explode, which would defeat the point of someone boarding your ship, right? Like they're boarding it to capture it. So you sort of like call someone's bluff.
So it's a mutually assured destruction sort of thing.
Yeah. So it will continue to come up.
That's getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, I think. But yeah, I mean, it's an intentional choice to construct a way to have melee combat in your sci-fi show. But I think we'll talk about that in a future episode.
But for the purposes of this one, they deployed this gas around the ring of space lasers.
Yes. So now, when they fired, they exploded. Yeah.
I'm no physicist, but if you pump gas out into the void of space, how can you make sure it will attach to go with where the space lasers are?
I mean, you can't really do that, but the implication with these Zephyr particles is that they're very, very heavy, I guess, because they behave a bit more like a gel or a liquid than a gas a lot of the time.
Oh, and so the gravity of the space lasers draws them in?
They're basically putting them in an orbit, like you see in the diagram where they're like pushing the Zephyr particles into this orbit. Right. In reality, if you had a gas, I mean, it's an anime, whatever. In reality, if you had a gas like that and you put it out into space, the fact that there's nothing pushing back on it would just cause the gas to, diffuse like immediately, even if it was very heavy. So things like nebulae, which you see on pictures and stuff, and they look like really small and really compact. These are actually like, hundreds of light years across, and we're seeing like enormous quantities of gas that are still diffusing or in the process of diffusing currently. So yeah, no, you can't do that in space, really, in real life. There you go. That's the physics corner.
I sort of thought it was a lame solution to the problem. I wish it was a bit more clever or fun or something.
The only thing that it sets up, I guess, is because they mentioned that Heinesen also has an Artemis necklace.
Yeah.
And it basically like checkmates that defensive play like very early. So as the audience, whenever you see now the Free Planets Alliance talking about the Heinesen necklace, I mean, we already know as the audience that it will not be a big deal for them to deal with.
Maybe is what you're going to say, but we also see this a couple of clips from Fezan, which we haven't really talked about, I guess, and their conniving ways. and
They're always up to no good there.
how they are already talking about this new rising star. They've also identified this rising star in the Empire and what they might be able to get out of him, or how they might be able to influence him, and that sort of thing.
I got the sense from those scenes that Faison is just a war profiteer state. It produces weapons. Their goal is to keep the war growing and expanding because it makes them more money, and that's how the Faison stays strong.
Yeah. I mean, we said before that they're like the Switzerland of the setting, but they're actually more like the UK of the setting in that sense.
Yeah. Gotcha. Oh, after I wrote this down, Siegfried gets the Artemis necklace destroyed. Maximilian starts freaking out, starts finding people to blame, and then here's your third Simpsons reference for the day. I thought he started doing the Seymour Skinner reference where he's the meme where he's like, "Am I wrong or are the children wrong?" He starts doing that. And then they Julius Caesar him.
Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
Now, is that a thing from history, or is that just from the Shakespeare play?
No, that really happened in history.
Okay.
I don't think Brutus.
That's just from the play.
He is recorded as asking, like, as being shocked when Brutus is involved, but I don't know if that's exactly his line. I can't say with any certainty. But obviously, Brutus is like his adopted son, right? And when he sees like Brutus in the crowd of his murderers, he's like, it dawns on him that he's lost everything. But it happened like nearly 2,000 years ago. So,
so Shakespeare had no fucking clue. He made that line up.
Yeah, I mean, Shakespeare was as distant from that as
we are,
almost as distant to that as we are. I mean, yeah, like 500 years in it,
and really, really far away from when this scene is set in Legend of the Galactic Heroes. So they probably didn't know. I mean, that's the thing. They didn't know what they were recreating.
They didn't realize
history repeats itself. I think
they didn't realize
that's what Yang Wenli would say.
How embarrassing!
Yeah.
Damn, George Lucas was right when he said history rhymes. Prescient
filmmaker George Lucas.
Yeah,
he was.
He's alive still. So.
As if he... Yeah, no, I thought the Julius Caesar thing was a little bit on the nose. They could have done it without the costumes. They could have told the same story without the costumes.
Yeah,
it would have been fine. It actually would have been like more of a surprise.
So they successfully take the world, take the planet without any casualties, which Siegfried reports back to Reinhardt with. Except there is one casualty, the Maximilian himself, and Siegfried is a little bit distraught by that. It seems like. Yeah,
I think that's weird. I mean,
I don't think he's upset. I think he's being weird. Like, I don't know. I think he's been really disingenuous, which I find.
Oh, sorry. It read to me not as distraught that the guy died, distraught that he like disappointed Reinhardt in some way by allowing one person to die.
I see.
And like the plan was no one would die, and Reinhardt is like, "It's cool, dude. Don't worry about it." And then Reinhardt asks Siegfried, like, "Hey, we're not like them, right?" He's just doing the "Are we the baddies" meme from. Which I thought was interesting that he even asked that, like that he even cares. But I think your characterization of him from the flashback, I think, puts that more into perspective for me.
I don't know how seriously to take Kircheis's line there, where he seems to be worried about this one casualty. It's I don't know. He delivers it with such like, "I'm sorry," but he doesn't really seem very emotionally invested. I just wonder whether he's just. I don't know, really.
Could that just be down to the quality of the voice acting?
I'm not sure.
I mean, since you mentioned it last time, like Kircheis's voice actor's performance is pretty lifeless a lot of the time. Obviously, when you're like watching in a language you don't understand, a lot of that goes missing. But there are some of the characters later in the show who have incredible voice performances, despite the fact I can't speak Japanese. And yeah, Kircheis is just pretty lifeless, like most of the way through the show, I think, which is a shame.
Do you think it's by comparison? Because I think so much of modern Japanese VA is the central quality of them is like conviction. They will perform their lines so hard.
It's so, yeah. So obviously, like, I've been learning a bit of Japanese because I live here, and I feel like I have an obligation to learn a bit. And this is one of the things that people say is that, like, a lot of the time when people come from abroad to Japan, they will use like anime as a something to mimic, you know. But like, yeah, the way that people talk in anime is like a very specific kind of performance. It's like going to the UK and speaking like a Shakespearean actor.
It's
You know,
performative,
like,
right? It's like it's like
yeah,
it's like you're in a musical
like,
almost.
yeah, exactly, yeah. Which I do like about Legends of Galactic Heroes, that most of the performances are very muted, quite natural.
Yeah.
They don't come across as like bombastic or anything like this. But Kircheis in particular is like very flat a lot of the time, I think. Yeah. Are you frustrated? Like this kind of stuff. Like
He did read as less sociopathic to me this episode for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So maybe he's growing on me.
He seems like a good egg or whatever whatever Reinhardt says to him at the end. Pretty sure that's what he says.
You're a good egg.
What does he say?
I think he says you're a good man. You're a good egg.
Oh, my last note does read because it does end with the narrator saying basically next time on Legend of the Galactic Heroes, Yang Wenli takes on the Iserlone Fortress. And it shows a picture of his face. And I did write, my last note is Yang Wenli's face and vibe does give good boy.
He's a very good boy. Yeah. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think the highlight was the flashback episode.
Yeah, I agree. I think episode 5 kind of sets up Kircheis a bit. That's sort of the purpose it's playing.
Yeah.
Because otherwise he doesn't get a lot of screen time because he's always overshadowed by Reinhardt. So he kind of needs an episode where he can shine on his own.
He's promoted to Vice Admiral, right? By the end of this.
Yeah.
And what rank is Reinhardt?
High Admiral, just Admiral.
He's above him, right? They're not equivalent.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it does put almost
Kircheis above the other people in his kind of entourage now. So they're all admirals, and then he goes on a little adventure and he becomes Vice Admiral, which seems to be a play that they intentionally, the two of them, set up to get that position for him as quickly as possible. And I think some of the other characters, some of the other admirals mentioned that at one point. They say, isn't it convenient that Kircheis gets sent on this mission and we don't? He'll definitely get promoted for it if he succeeds. And they're like, yeah, if he succeeds, which he will. So, okay. And then he comes back and he gets promoted above them.
Is the implication then, because they had the solution to the space laser problem, Lowengram did, that he just didn't give the solution to those 3,000 ships before so that they would fail and then give themselves the opportunity to do this?
I think those 3,000 ships were under someone else's command, right? I got the impression that flashback with the 3,000 ships was actually before Lowengram became
I think
Admiral.
So.
It was like a previous attempt to get them to bend the knee.
Gotcha. That would be pretty dastardly if he did that.
Yeah. Well, let's just wait and see.
Bad on him as well.
It's a lot of people to die to just promote his friend. Like that's real nepotism.
Yeah. Nepo baby. Kircheis Nepo baby. But yes, I think it's all set up right now. Like he's intentionally got the solution from Fazan and then he rises to it. We got a short little conversation between the precious boys, Mittermeier and Royenthal.
Yeah, I think that's the conversation I was referring to.
Yeah. They get precious little screen time in this first season, but
is that when they're fixing stuff? Isn't he passing him tools?
Oh no, not those guys.
Oh,
those are just some soldiers.
Who are you referring to?
Mittermeier and Royenthal are two of
the like 8
Lowengram's staff. Yeah,
admirals. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The one with like the blonde one and the dark haired one with the different coloured eyes.
That's tough. These characters should have nameplates that's always visible in every
Yeah,
shot.
like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
Hello,
or
my
like
name
health
is.
bars or
Yeah.
something.
it really would be useful, I think, in these early episodes. But that's it. I think that's 3, 4, and 5. Next time
Yeah,
we'll
that's all.
cover, I guess, I don't know, 6 and 7, maybe 6, 7, 8, something like that. Outro time.
Outro time. I read the outro last time.
And so you shall again,
I could do it
because
again.
I read the intro both sides.
Or maybe wait. Are we going to do Kamel's predictions every episode, or are we waiting like for?
I think we have to wait until I have some, because
Yeah.
I don't really have any besides that. His
Yeah.
hubris will take him out.
It's a spontaneous segment to keep the audience guessing.
I'll
we
keep
don't
a
have
running
jingle yet.
tally of them, and when I have like a couple loaded up,
Yeah.
we can fire.
Fire the orbital laser of Kamel's wild, crazy predictions,
Fire the orbital laser of prediction.
which are famously
Always come true.
Always work.
Yeah.
Always work.
Thanks for listening to this episode of In the Skies of Love. We hope you enjoyed our discussion of Legends of the Galactic Heroes. If you have any comments or questions, please reach out to us at intheskiesoflove@gmail.com. You can find Kamel at HiKamel on Twitter. And you can find Tom and I nowhere, because we don't have any internet presence. Tune in next time, where we talk about Yang Wenli's maybe success at taking Isilon Fortress.
Now, if you told me that the George Lucas talk show is doing a 80-hour marathon of every Star Wars product, including the holiday specials, hell yeah, I'd be into that. I would watch all of that, and I did. But that's a good use of my time.
Maybe that's how we'll send off this podcast. When we've done the whole show,
Yeah,
we just watch the whole show from start to finish on stream.
I would do that with you.
How long would that?
If the show, I think it's about 36 hours. If the show got like thousands of listeners,
Yeah.
If there's even like a handful of Reddit threads about the show,
Yeah.
like 2 or 3,
Yeah.
then I consider that the threshold at which I'd be willing to
Do a
Legend of
36
Galactic Heroes
hour
marathon.
Twitch stream.
Yeah.
On
If
stream.
we never get any listeners and this is just like us, and
It would be
no
very
one ever
sad
listens to the
if
show.
we did get 1,000 or so listeners or whatever you said, and then we were like, okay, we're going to do the stream, and then nobody's joined the stream. That would be quite sad.
But then we just have a very nice time watching Legend of Galactic
Yeah,
Heroes
for 36 hours.
We could cut the intros and outros. I know it's sacrilegious, but then we could probably cut it down to like 28 hours, because they're both quite long.
Well, if we just play it on Plex, it will have a skip intro button, so we can just do that.
I hope you're not skipping the outros and intros. Come on.
What?
I hope you're not skipping the intros and outros.
You keep cutting out when you are asking me this question. Do I seriously have to watch the intro and outro every time?
No, not every time. But you should listen to that outro song all the way through a couple of times, at least.
Why?
Because it's really good.
Oh,
also,
okay.
there's loads of like clues in the intro and outro.
Is there actually, or are you just trying to intrigue me into watching it?
No, they are.
Okay.
Like, there's like